Why this forgotten ghost town features windows that only open from outside. Look closely at the architecture of Silvercreek, and you'll notice a chilling architectural anomaly. Every single window locks only from the outside. These aren't ruins meant to keep intruders out. They were designed to keep the residents in. Today, we're uncovering the terrifying ritual behind these iron latches and the eyeless shadow they were built to contain. The architecture of imprisonment. There is a town sitting at the base of a red mesa in the high desert where the windows don't work the way windows should. Not broken. Not rotted through. Not the victim of 100 years of wind and neglect. Designed. Deliberately. Precisely. To keep whatever was inside from getting out. This is Silvercreek. From above, Silvercreek looks like every other copper mining town that the American Southwest swallowed whole between 1880 and 1920. 8 city blocks, a main street, a company office, a church with a missing steeple, standard bones, familiar geometry, the kind of place you've seen in 100 sepia photographs, men in suspenders squinting into the sun, women hanging laundry between buildings that all lean slightly east from the prevailing wind. But as you come down closer, as the detail begins to resolve, something registers as wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not the kind of wrong that hits you immediately like a scream. The quiet kind. The kind that builds at the base of your skull before your conscious mind catches up. Every single window on every single building has an iron latch mounted to the exterior sill. Stand on the main street of Silvercreek and reach out and flip one open. The window groans outward toward you. You have complete access to the interior. You can lean inside, smell the century-old dust, see the collapsed furniture, the rusted stove, the tilted shelves. From out here, you have all the control in the world. Now step inside. Stand in that same room and reach for the same window from the other side. There is nothing to grip. No handle. No lever. No secondary mechanism of any kind. The latch exists entirely on the outer face of the sill. The window can be pushed slightly inward from the street, but it cannot be opened, manipulated, or moved from within the room. Not by a child. Not by a grown man throwing his full weight against it. The bolt alone is nearly 2 inches of forged iron. Whatever force designed these latches designed them to hold against something desperate. And this is not one building. This is not one peculiar homeowner's paranoia preserved in wood and iron. This is every building on every block in Silvercreek. The residential homes. The company office. The church. The schoolhouse. Every window. Every latch. Outside only. Researchers who first documented the town in the 1960s proposed the obvious explanations, because the obvious explanations are always where you start. Fire safety codes of the era sometimes mandated external locking to prevent drafts from feeding flames in the event of a kitchen fire. Theft deterrence was another candidate. The copper or Silvercreek processed was valuable, and perhaps the windows were secured each night by a watchman making rounds. Both theories collapse the moment you put your hands on the hardware. Fire safety latches of this period were designed to release under pressure from inside. A trapped resident needed to be able to force them open in an emergency. These cannot be forced. The mechanical advantage required to throw this bolt exists only from the exterior. A watchman would need a ladder and significant upper body strength just to reach the second-floor windows on the residential block. And the watchman theory carries a more immediate problem. If a watchman locked these windows each night, he was locking the residents inside their homes. Which means the residents knew. Which means they agreed. And a town of 340 people does not agree to sleep locked inside their own homes unless the alternative is something they are more afraid of than the dark. The history that was never written down. Silvercreek was founded in 1887 by the Harlan Mining Consortium. By 1894, it had reached a peak population of approximately 340 residents. The copper seam they worked was modest, but productive enough to justify the town's infrastructure. There was a school with 2 teachers. A physician named Aldous Crane who had trained in Philadelphia and apparently chosen the desert for reasons he never explained in writing. A rotating circuit preacher who arrived every 6 weeks and stayed 4 days. By 1899, a telegraph line connected Silvercreek to the nearest regional hub 40 miles east. It was abandoned in 1911. Completely. In under 3 weeks. No record explains why. The Harlan Mining Consortium filed no closure documentation. There was no recorded labor dispute, no cave-in, no flood, no documented illness. The telegraph line went silent mid-transmission on a Thursday in October. The physician's medical log, recovered in 1960 by a regional historical society, ends on a Tuesday with a half-completed entry about a child's fever. The handwriting deteriorates across the final page and simply stops. No period at the end of the last sentence. No final punctuation of any kind. The town did not wind down. It stopped. What survived, discovered in the private collection of a Harlan Company manager's family in the late 1990s, was a series of letters written between 1908 and 1911 that were never intended to become historical documents. A notation on the envelope of the first one, in handwriting that did not match the letter itself, read simply, "Burn these." Someone didn't. The first letter, dated March of 1909, was written by a supply clerk named Hennessy to his brother in Arizona. Most of it is ordinary, complaints about wages and the quality of the company-provided flour. But near the end, almost as an afterthought, he writes about the windows. He says the latches on the South residential block were completed that week. He says the men worked through the night to finish them and that nobody slept while the work was being done. He says he asked the town alderman why the residents didn't simply leave rather than submit to being locked in each night, and he describes the alderman's reaction not with words, but with a comparison. He says the alderman looked at him the way a man looks when he's forgotten that leaving is something people are allowed to do. The second letter comes from a woman named Margaret Elford, written to her sister 11 months later. It is not addressed anywhere specific, which suggests she either didn't send it or sent it to an address she no longer trusted to reach anyone. She writes about light. She says the light in Silvercreek changes at a specific point in the evening, a particular quality of dusk that she cannot describe except to say that it happens quickly, faster than it should, and that the entire town has come to recognize the moment. She says that no one goes out after the light changes. She says that if you are not inside when it changes, you will see the shape at the ridge. She does not describe the shape. She says only that seeing it is worse than anything that happens inside. There is a ridge visible from Silvercreek's main street. Red sandstone. Nothing grows on it. Standing at the edge of town on a clear day, you can see how completely it dominates the eastern horizon. Every resident of Silvercreek would have looked at that ridge every morning of their lives there. The third letter is from Elias Vore, the company manager himself. It is dated February 1911, 8 months before the town went silent. It is the only document that attempts to name what Silvercreek built its window latches to contain. He writes that it has no eyes. He is emphatic about this, emphatic in the way a person is emphatic when they have heard the thing described incorrectly and the inaccuracy disturbs them more than the subject itself. He says he has read accounts from the early residents that describe it as having eyes that are covered, or eyes that are simply closed. He says that is wrong. He says there is no face. There is a head-shaped absence and below that hands, many hands. He says the windows keep it outside because it cannot operate a latch. It has never learned how. And then he writes the sentence that ends the letter. He writes, "We must ensure it never does." The ritual and the scarred glass. The letters explain the fear. But the windows themselves tell a different story, one that is physical and immediate in a way that letters cannot be, because the glass in Silvercreek's windows carries marks that no weather event, no settling, no century of thermal expansion can account for. Hold a flashlight at a low angle against the interior surface of the glass on the main residential building and rake the beam across it slowly. The scarring emerges like a photograph developing in a dark room. Long, parallel striations pressed into the glass from the inside. Not cracks. Not chips. The kind of mark left when something soft but persistent moves across a hard surface repeatedly, in the same direction, over a very long period of time. The marks run horizontally, at a height of approximately 5 feet from the floor. On every window on the interior face. On every building in Silvercreek. A geologist who examined photographs of the scarring in 2019 said they were consistent with repeated friction contact, something moving against the glass from inside the room, pressing outward. A criminologist who reviewed the same photographs without context said the pattern reminded her of something she had seen in a particular category of case that she did not want to specify. When pressed, she said, confinement cases. Long-term ones. The residents of Silvercreek were pressing their hands against their windows. Every night. For years. What were they looking at? The letters give us the beginning of an answer, and the architecture gives us the rest. Because Silvercreek was not simply designed to keep something out. The window latches are only one part of a system that becomes visible when you map the town from above and look at what every window faces. Every residential window, with external latches, faces east. Every single one. The homes that sit on the western edge of town have normal windows on their west-facing walls, interior latches, standard construction. But every window that faces the ridge, every opening that looks toward the east, was retrofitted with external locks sometime between 1905 and 1909, based on the hardware's manufacturing marks. The residents weren't being locked in randomly. They were being positioned, every night, behind latched glass, facing east, facing the ridge. Watching. A historian specializing in frontier religious practices reviewed the letter archive and the architectural survey and offered an interpretation that she acknowledged she could not prove but could not dismiss. She said the window system had the structure of a containment ritual. Not containment of the residents. Containment of the thing at the ridge. The residents watching it. Holding it in place with their attention. The glass between them not a barrier but a membrane. Something that allowed the watching without allowing contact. The latches, she said, were not to keep the residents from escaping. They were to keep the residents from breaking the line of sight, from turning away, from closing their eyes and ending the vigil that kept whatever moved along that ridge from learning, finally, how a latch works. The night the watching stopped. October 1911. The telegraph goes silent on a Thursday. By the end of the following week, Silvercreek is empty. There are two ways to interpret this. The first is that the residents finally decided, collectively, that whatever waited at the ridge was a lesser terror than the life they were living, and they left. The second is that something changed, that the vigil failed, that something found its way to a window from outside, and, in the dark, slowly, over many patient nights of trying, finally felt the mechanism of a latch click open under its fingers. The evidence does not clearly support either interpretation over the other. What it does support is that the departure was not planned, was not organized, and left behind everything. Furniture. Food. Clothing. The physician's half-written sentence. The schoolteacher's lesson plan for the following Monday, still chalked on the board when the Historical Society arrived 50 years later. People who are leaving do not leave their lesson plans. What remains? Silvercreek sits in the same basin it has always occupied. The mesa hasn't moved. The ridge is still there to the east, red sandstone, nothing growing on it, dominating the horizon the way it always has. The windows are still latched from outside. Most of them, anyway. There are 3 windows in the town, all on the same building, the northernmost house on the residential block, where the latches appear to have been removed from the exterior. Not fallen off. Not rusted away. The mounting hardware is gone too, cleanly, as though someone took the time to extract every bolt. On the interior sill of those 3 windows, where there are no latches anymore, the scarring in the glass is different from the rest of the town. Deeper. Concentrated. Not the long horizontal striation of hands pressing outward, but something smaller, more deliberate, a single point of contact repeated in exactly the same spot on each of the 3 panes until the glass clouded around it like a bruise. Whatever was pressing against those 3 windows was pressing from outside. Nobody has identified the building's last occupant. The census records have a name assigned to that address, but the name appears nowhere else in the archive. No arrival record. No wages record. No letter. No departure. Just 3 windows facing east, with their latches removed, and glass that remembers something standing in the street outside, pressing one finger against the pane, in the same spot, every night, learning the shape of what was on the other side. The ridge is visible from those windows. On a clear day, you can see the whole length of it. Nothing moves there now. Nothing that you can see. Silvercreek remains on private land and is not open to visitors. The letter archive is held at a regional historical society under a restricted access designation. The window hardware has not been removed or altered by researchers. The glass has not been cleaned.